Hello everyone, this is International Master Levy Rozman recording my first, but hopefully first of many, courses for iChess.net. And in this course I'm very excited to bring to you my secrets in the Trompowsky attack after d4, knight f6, and bishop g5. Now, when you're playing this opening with the white pieces, it's a secondary option because you are avoiding a lot of the theory that comes with the move knight f6. Namely the Indian defenses like the Queen's, Nimso, and King's Indian, Bogo Indian. You're avoiding the Grunfeld. You're avoiding some variations of the Queen's Gambit declined, etc., etc. Instead, you're pushing the game toward territory where you are hoping to be familiar and where you're hoping to catch your opponents off guard, not ready, and gaining an opening advantage in that matter. I have played this opening now for almost 8 years. I've used it to win a handful of very nice games against all sorts of players. I actually got my first win against the Grandmaster in this opening. So I believe that I've built up a pretty good resume, but to bolster my personal games in this course, I've also included the games of many strong players. So we're going to be taking a look at two different types of situations in this course, if you will. We're going to be looking at games where the stronger rated player with the white pieces completely dismantles an opponent playing black, who's slightly weaker. And on the flip side, we're going to look at also a good handful of games where a lower rated player played the Trompowsky and outplayed their stronger opponent, perhaps using the element of surprise and catching them off guard. So this will inspire you, whatever your rating might be, to push past the rating boundary when you play this opening and to bring you great success. Now, having said all that, let me just give you a little bit of the roadmap, in the course, and a bit of the methodology, and then we'll just jump right into it. So we have 11 chapters. No chapter is necessarily more important than the other, but I do think right in the middle, the chapters where you will study the positions after the knight coming to e4, followed by d5 or c5, those are the chapters that you have to know like the back of your hand. Because you're going to be facing the move knight e4 quite a lot. You're also going to be facing the second move, d5, quite a lot as well. d5 is arguably the main line, and it can transpose after d4, d5, bishop g5. So, with that in mind, we have 11 chapters. Please go through them at your convenience. You can jump around. It's not necessarily the most important thing in the world. And that brings me to the methodology of this course and all the iChess courses under this umbrella. Our goal here is not to necessarily bring you a deep theoretical understanding of this opening. Instead, what we're doing is we're studying games of very strong players, which are essentially model games, and games where the pawn structure is defined or the minor piece imbalance is defined and exercised to a very, very high level in that game. That's how the chapters are based. I will also be setting up critical tactical positions from these variations to either begin the chapter or to greet you at some point in the middle of the chapter. So a lot of the time in the clips, I will start off and you can pause the clip to try to solve the position, and then we will see how that position was reached by going through the opening stage of the game. So you will be also studying not just the structures, the minor piece imbalances, the essential trades of the beginning of the opening, but you will also be studying the tactical patterns and gaining a tactical understanding of this opening. So, having said that, each chapter will come with a summary as well as an introduction. So to kind of give you a quick look into what we're going to be studying and a quick summary of what you have studied. Having said that, well, let's jump right in. In Chapter 1, we will be studying the Vaganyan Gambit, and I will see you there. Happy hunting. So you've made it past the introduction. Congratulations! But now we have all the material to learn. In Chapter 1, we're going to be studying the Vaganyan Gambit, and we're going to be looking at 5 games. One of the games, your humble author, was the player playing white. And in 3 of the other games, we have super GMs playing with the white pieces. So we have Dmitry Andreikin, Russian superstar, Timur Gareev, Uzbek American transplant, and Mark Hebden, not necessarily a super GM, but a very, very strong British grandmaster and a a champion of this opening with the white pieces and of aggressive chess in general. So the Vaganyan gambit begins with d4, knight f6, bishop g5, and c5, d5, queen b6. When our opponent strikes the pawn on c1, we gambit it, they take, and we bring this bishop back. Usually they go back to b6, and we take the center with e4. This is essentially the central tabia. You will play a lot of positions, you will play a lot of games from this position, and you will study in this course, in this chapter, and I suppose also in this course, positions where your opponent plays either maybe d6 or e5 or g6 or something along those lines, whether they give you the center and allow you to push in the center with e5 or not. One thing to keep in mind when you're studying these games and looking at the tactics, the Vaganyan gambit is very sharp. So you should welcome this, because if your opponent has not prepared the Vaganyan gambit in some time and you have, this is a very big advantage. In general, any sharp variation always favors the person that is more prepared, because they know when the critical mistakes can be made, and the other opponent will be walking on, not eggshells, but walking in very suspicious shoes, so to say. I don't know if that's a saying, but apparently now I have invented a saying. They will be very, very hesitant to play a lot of the aggressive options and oftentimes can fall into bad positions. The only thing that I have to say before I send you off into the first game, please be aggressive when you're in a Vaganyan. Think go for the kill. Try to hunt down in the center, try to hunt down on the side of the board on the king side. We'll see very, very good attacking chess in this chapter. And as I said in the introduction, and this is why I began with this chapter, we're hunting here. We're going straight for the kill. So as I ended the introduction, I will also end the introduction to chapter 1. Happy hunting. All right, welcome to chapter 1. In chapter 1, we're going to be taking a look at 5 different games from the Vaganyan gambit, which is named after the Armenian grandmaster, Raphael Vaganyan. He was a sharp, innovative player, and one of the reasons why this opening is named after him is because he was pretty much the pioneer of this variation for white. So, having said that, let's take a look at this first position here. I mentioned in the introduction, my style is going to be introducing the position, showing you what my opponent played, and then letting you pause the video and try to solve the tactic. After that, we will go through the game together. I think that's a little bit more fun, so you can kind of get the taste of the position right away. So we have a position here where my opponent with black has been quite strongly outplayed in the opening. Doesn't have a lot of counterplay, can't get the thematic move b5 in here, and the pieces are looking cramped. So in this position, my opponent played the move knight g4, which makes a lot of sense. The bishop and the queen now target the knight on g5. So, at this point, I would like you to pause your video and try to figure out what white played, because I'm about to explain exactly what happens. So, in this position, obviously my knight on g5 is under attack. I pretty much have a couple of choices. I can protect it with my h-pawn by playing something like h4, or I can move it back to h3. Neither one of those things appealed to me. Instead, I launched in with knight to e6. This move is definitely in white's favor here. Black is not castled, the king is stuck in the center, and although my opponent can play the move f takes e6, which is what he did, I mean, if he doesn't play f takes e6, the knight is going to cause a lot of trouble, and it's probably going to take on g7 next, assuming my opponent saw that it was attacking his queen, and since he was 2200, I think that he did. So f takes e6, f takes e6. Of course, there is already the devastating threat of mate in 1, right, on f7, and if he gets rid of my e6 pawn with something like bishop takes e6, well, then I take, he plays maybe knight takes, but after queen f7, or maybe a move like bishop c4, obviously the position is very bad for black. So he did not get involved in this, instead he went back, knight f6, and I continued piling on the pressure. But what even got me to this point where I could play the move knight e6? That's kind of the thing I'm going to be introducing and constantly explaining in this course, because it's one thing to kind of be prompted with tactics. You know, I set up a position, I say white to play. It's another thing to be able to maneuver through these opening positions and these opening moves and actually land yourself in a position where, without any sort of prompting, you can feel that there are tactics. I was looking at the move knight e6 for a while, and finally I got a chance to play it, and black's position crumbled. So let's back up a little bit. We have d4, knight f6, bishop g5, the Trompowsky. c5, d5, queen b6. This is the beginning of the Vaganyan gambit. Instead of defending the pawn on b2, white plays knight c3, queen b2, and comes back with the bishop. And this move might look weird, but the fact that you've committed 2 tempi in the opening is actually not so bad, because now this queen is in an awkward situation on b2, usually has to retreat back to b6, in fact pretty much always does, and white gets to immediately start launching e4 and f4 up the board. Excuse me. So queen b6, e4. In the next 4 games, I'm gonna kind of just breeze through this opening because, like other authors of the series have mentioned, and I mentioned in the introduction, it's not really a repertoire course. If you want to take a look at the repertoire options yourself, you have chess-based, chess-DB, other methods of doing so. I will touch on it briefly, but mainly we're looking at the tactics. So, e5, f4, d6, f5. This is not the most common way of playing this position, but I had studied the move f5 in a publication and a book, so just kind of trying to take some space here. h5. Now, this move is obviously very clear. My opponent did not want me expanding with my pawn going to g4 and then maybe to g5. So in the Vaganyan gambit, you get a lot of positions where white has given up the b2 pawn, but just has a ton of space. Like the center is being overrun by the pawns, which makes it much easier to play, because if anything, losing the b2 pawn is only a liability for black. Or I should say gaining the b2 pawn is only a liability for black, because white can play something like rook b1 and instantly has pressure down the b file. So it's kind of like a grab and go. It's a risk. And if you play it aggressively enough, it can very, very, very much pay off. So let's see, h5. How did I handle the position? I immediately started to play aggressive moves based on the moves that my opponent was making. Let me explain what that means. The move h5, right, takes away the move g4, but greatly weakens the dark squares. My opponent has pushed the pawn 2 squares, which means that some of these dark squares are money, right? So I play knight f3, bishop e7, and I even spent the tempo on a move here, knight g5. I don't have to develop anything else, but I'm already eyeing the possibility of jumping into this devastating square, because he can't really kick me out of g5. Luckily, pawns can't go backwards, as Sam Shanklin points out, who actually has a Grunfeld series, I believe, in the 80-20 tactics multiplier. a6, a4. In the Vaganyan gambit, you usually always answer the move a6 with a4 to prevent your opponent at some point from playing the move b5. So, knight bd7. At this point, I have a choice of moves. I can move my light-squared bishop, my queen, my rook to b1. I chose queen f3. I thought that was an aggressive and powerful move. Queen c7, common idea to drop the queen back. Folks usually decide whether they do c7 or d8. Let's keep developing. Our position is not quite ready to play knight e6 yet. So, bishop e2, just a simple developing move for pairing castling. Rook b8, what does the opponent want? They want to play b5, rook b1, so we just totally clamp down on b5. c4, this is a very common idea in the Benoni and in the Vaganyan gambit. You try to push this pawn so you can free up the c5 square for your knight, and then that way you can untangle. But c4 is a target. Rook b4. I mean, there is no reason I shouldn't play that move. My opponent gave me a target. Knight c5, rook takes c4. So now my opponent has given me the pawn back and is kind of trying to counterbalance that with getting the pieces developed, bishop d7. But just castles, right? Now my opponent in this position spent one more move, queen d8, obviously eyeing the knight on g5. And here I thought, well, b5 is looking quite likely here, right? My opponent, if given the chance, can play the move b5, and so I shut it down. And now, our case of deja vu, our first of it. We're going to have a lot of those. Knight g4, and in this position, knight e6. A crushing move. F takes e6, F takes e6. What even facilitates this for white? Why is white ready for this? Because literally, if you go back to this position, all of white's pieces except 3 pawns have moved. All pieces except 3 pawns. Black has not moved a pawn. It looks like the queen hasn't moved, even though it's moved almost, how many times? b6, b2, b6, c7. The queen has moved 5 times. It's move 18. and the black queen is on its home square despite moving 5 times. That's crazy. The king on e8 hasn't moved. Rook on h8 hasn't moved. Excuse me. Knight e6. White is fully developed and ready to go. Fe, fe, knight f6. Now, what's important here is not necessarily following my exact moves, right? There's a chance you never even get a position like this. But let's continue to play energetically. My opponent gives me the opportunity to take the bishop on d7, and I politely reject. Instead, I go to g3. Now there is a rook open down the f-file, the queen is open down the g-file, the bishop's targeting h5, and the bishop on d7 is not really worth my time. I'd much rather play queen g6 and queen f7 mate. So finally, king f8. Now I decide to take. The problem with delaying this capture for too long is that maybe the bishop will slide back here. I don't really want that. Takes. Okay. Material is looking equal. How do we continue to make progress? Let's go bishop e3. There is a possibility here to chop down this knight and then have an opportunity to attack on e5 here. a5, rook b5. For some of these longer games, this game went almost 50 moves. I'm going to cut things just a little bit short because I don't want to spend extra 15-20 minutes of your time kind of just showing you the technique to finish the game. The central focus is using the tactical possibilities in the position to gain a big plus, right? To gain a plus in the position. White is dominating here. Black is not castled. Black's king is stuck on f8, looking straight into the barrel of this rook. So we're going to try to play just a few more moves to see how white locks down a full advantage. Knight a6. So white has an opportunity here to take on a5, but instead white plays the move queen g6. And the queen on g6 is putting pressure on the king further, and now there is an option to play bishop takes h5 in this position. I think there was a motorcycle outside. Queen e8. Trying to trade the queens. Should we trade the queens? No. Why would we do that? Our queen is significantly more powerful than the opponent's. Queen c8. Highly insisting on a queen trade, but this comes at an expense. Queen takes b7, rook takes queen takes c8, rook takes c8, rook takes b7. Now those of you might be saying, wait a second. Levy, what are you doing? There's a knight hanging. Yeah, but you see, rook c3, bishop a6. Levy, what are you doing? There's a bishop hanging. Not quite, my friends. Rook b8 check. Black has to give up the exchange in search of some sort of counterplay, but after a simple move like bishop b5, which actually threatens bishop e8 checkmate, you can see the tactical possibilities in the position. I just want to quickly go back. The opening, bishop d2, launch the pawns. f5 is a different move than you'll see throughout some of these chapters, some of the parts of the first chapter, because f5 is not the most popular move, but just a move that gains space. And we get to a situation where literally, look at this position, my friends. From this point forward, after the move bishop d2, look how every single move white makes progress into the black position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Even bishop e2 is progress. You're going forward. 9, because rook b1 slides the rook over, makes it more useful. c4, rook b4, more progress. Rook takes c4, lateral progress. I mean, castling is progress. Rook b4 is maybe the only move. The only move since like move 5. 12 straight moves, white has made progress into the position. And that move is punctuated, and this whole plan is punctuated by the move knight e6. I really was proud of this game. I thought it was a great game played by white. I mean, it could have been played by me or just about anybody on planet Earth, or Mars for that matter. But white just deliberately plays in the Vaganyan gambit. You have to play with a purpose because you are committing a full pawn in the beginning of the game. So, we begin our journey with knight e6. I will see you all in part 2 of chapter 1 for more fireworks in the Vaganyan gambit. Okay, moving right along here, part 2 of chapter 1 in the Vaganyan gambit studies. We have a game played by Timur Gareev with the white pieces, strong grandmaster, I would say an Uzbekistani transplant to the United States, maybe something like that. Also the blindfold chess king versus Sam Sevian, top talent, top junior talent, I should say, in the United States. This game was played in the US Championship in 2015. What's interesting is I actually played Sam Sevian in 2016 at the Millionaire Chess Open in Atlantic City, round 9, and I needed to draw in the last round. I played a Trompowsky. It was a very crazy game, and I managed to draw and get my second IM norm. So if you're going to play Sam Sevian, you should probably play the Trompowsky. I think he doesn't know too much about it. Just kidding. Should Sam see this, I probably should apologize. Anyway, getting to the material. We have this position on the board. Sam Sevian has just played the move Queen A5. That attacks the knight on C3. What should Timur do? I suggest you pause the video and take a look. So, in Vaganyan positions, when your opponent has not closed the center, like in the last thing that we studied, this pawn was here. There are always tactical possibilities of breaking through the center of the board with a move like e5, which is exactly what Timur played here. The move e5 is devastating in black's position. If you notice, the opening is going to roll along quite the same way, right? What is going to be the difference? Timur plays rook b1 first, but then he plays f4 anyway. Both moves are pretty interchangeable. In this position, my last opponent played the move e5, right? And then I played f5. But Sam Sevian played g6, which allows us to play slightly differently. We still want to play moves like knight f3 or a4 if our opponent plays a6, or bishop b5 check. Very common ideas here. Timur chooses bishop b5, which makes Sam kind of question, well, how's he going to block that check? He plays knight fd7. It's a very interesting move. Most people after knight bd7, I should say that it's important for white to play a4 here, because the move a6 will come and then b5 will come. So you should play a4 and be completely okay trading your light squared bishop, because the pressure on b7 will be too great. For example, a6 takes, and now black can't take with this bishop because of the pressure on the b7 pawn, so obviously you will just take it for free. So we have knight fd7 in the game, a4, preventing that plan, bishop g7, and now he plays a very aggressive move, h4. Another common tactical idea here, trying to play h4, h5. A lot of motorcycles on the road tonight. But you can play something like knight f3 and castle. That's also good. If you're trying to take your opponent's head clean off, or you have a tournament situation where you have to win the game, you can play like this, play aggressively. h5, knight h3. Same idea as knight f3. I mean, you're pretty much trying to put the knight on g5. So, a6, bishop e2, he retreats the bishop, same square it was the last game, but now the move b5 is impossible. c4, a move we saw before. Knight g5, queen a5, and now we have our critical position. You could play a move like rook h3, which defends, but then you can't castle. Instead, white plays the brilliant move e5. If black doesn't take that pawn, black is subjecting themselves to the move e6, or knight takes f7, the light square tactics that we saw in the previous game that I played with the white pieces. So he takes. But Timur is not trying to take back on e5. Timur is trying to use the momentum against black. Black has just taken a pawn, but they've blocked their bishop out of the threat on c3, which means white has a free move to continue to steamroll, continue to move forward. The point is, if you take that pawn on d6, which you kind of have to, because if you don't, that pawn is taking you, and your king's going to get stuck in the center. If you take it, you open up the knight hops. Knight ce4. Now, black's king is stranded in the middle, and the queen on a5 is marooned, and black has all sorts of problems. Knight takes d6 is a big threat. Black has to make a move now defending the d6 pawn, but what does white keep doing? Rolling along, keep attacking. That d6 pawn is a target. Bishop b4, boom. We have three things attacking that now. Black must castle here. Black must castle. Because if black doesn't castle, we're not trying to take there with the bishop, we're trying to take with the knight. Check, black has to keep the king in the center. Castles, bishop takes d6, queen c6, and look at this position. It looks like you can finally reap the fruits of your labor. Take that rook. You've done a great job. No, not at all, my friends. Timur keeps chugging along. f5. This game teaches you the value of the central pawn breaks in this opening. e5, d6, f5. In some way or another, they will be devastating in these positions. f5 here is a killer move. The point is that you can't really take here, because you're going to get steamrolled on the king side. There's moves like bishop takes f8 in the air, And if anything, I wouldn't be surprised if white can just take the rook, like let's say takes back, and quite frankly just drop the knight back and go for these pawns and launch open and attack the king. What Timur was thinking about with the move f5 is, I don't want to allow black to play e takes f4 and activate the bishop. Instead, I would much rather play the move f5, and that dark squared bishop is locked away on g7. This game actually concluded within the next 9 moves, so we can kind of take a look at it. Knight f6, bishop f3. Continuing to apply the pressure, not taking that rook on f8 and going, I did a good job, I deserve myself an exchange. No, he keeps rolling right along. Queen d7, fg, knight takes e4, g takes f7 check, queen takes f7, sacrificing the queen, because if rook takes f7 were to be played, white can just play something like bishop e4, and I mean, mate is coming, my friends. Mate is coming. And also there's queen takes h5 for another extra jackpot. So queen takes f7, Sevian gives up the queen, knight takes f7, knight c3, going for some tactics, but in this position, Timur keeps it cool. Queen d2, knight takes b1. He doesn't have to play like this. He has many ways to win, but knight h6 check, king h7, queen g5, maximum fanciness. The point is that bishop takes h6 is punished with the move bishop e4 check. So here, rook takes f3, g takes f3, bishop h6, queen e7. And simply a resignation from Sam in lieu of the fact that bishop takes e5 and rook g1 are coming. So, total beatdown by white here, but punctuated greatly. Like I said in the opening, if the opponent does not take the center, there are always attacking possibilities. Do remember the move a4, very important if you're going to put your bishop on b5. h4, knight h3, and in this position, the move e5. I think here that Sam simply had to castle, but even that is risky because you are subjecting yourself to a potential pawn storm, or just, quite frankly, giving this pawn back. I mean, right, just like in the first game, you're going to get an extra pawn, you're going to give it back, you don't have much to show for it. So a brilliant display of attacking chess here by Timur, very much in the style of Vaganyan Gambit. Let's keep on going.